It should not be this complicated, but here we are as we have a brand new update on the Marco Rossi situation, and honestly, it's just gotten to a ridiculous point. We have to dive into the newest reports on what Guerin is doing. We also have a great update on the Kirill Kaprizov situation, and a little bit of Kirill Kaprizov highlight talk as he was performing in this KHL versus NHL All-Star game as Malkin sets him up for a nice assist. Plus, we got some great things from The Athletic, where some of the writers have ranked the Wild quite high compared to maybe our expectations. A lot of great stuff coming up in this episode of Wild Digest. And you know what? We're just going to start with our boy Kirill, because I love talking about Kirill Kaprizov, and just straight out the gate, this has got me happy, right? Kirill Kaprizov negotiations have been, quote, going well, according to Frank Saravalli. And look, we know the Wild owner, everyone around the Wild has said that, look, it's basically a blank check at this point. Like, give the guy whatever he wants, 15 million, 16 million. At this point, like, you know, I wish we could have had it done by now, but look, people are taking vacations. We're still just in mid-July. There's a lot of time to sign this extension. It doesn't even need to be done this summer. It doesn't need to be done until next year. I still really want it done sooner than later, but this is just a breath of fresh air. And, you know, to celebrate this, let's take a look at some Kirill Kaprizov highlights. Let's be honest, this is really an Evgeny Malkin highlight, because that was incredible. But just seeing him play, seeing him on the ice, seeing him smiling here has me smiling too, because look, I miss Wild hockey. I miss Wild hockey as much as you guys do, right? And so seeing him there, hearing the negotiations are going well, it's a bit of a breath of fresh air compared to the Marco Rossi situation, which I know, look, we're all kind of tired of hearing about it, but we do have to talk about it a bit later. We have something from Joe Smith, something from Dave Pagnotta. We got a lot of stuff, but for now, let's rejoice in Kirill Kaprizov, the guy who had 56 points in 41 games this year, the guy who, hot take right now, I'm going to bet on Kirill Kaprizov winning the Hart Trophy this year, because I fully expect the Wild to be better than a lot of people are expecting this year. Why not? Fully healthy season for Kirill Kaprizov. Bring Rossi back or not, who knows, but him with our other line mates, Boldy's going to take another step. I'm actually really, really excited to see what's going to happen with this top six next year, and I don't think Johansson is going to be there. I think we're going to see Yurov up there. I think we're going to see Tarasenko up there. It's going to be a fun year, so I'm excited for Kaprizov, excited about that note. And before we get to Rossi, I want to go to something a little bit different. Now, I'll link this down below, as well as the Athletic article I'll talk about later. But JFresh, we all know JFresh, right? He makes those great cards to tell us that the players we like are good, the players we don't like are not good, and we ignore the ones that don't fit our narrative. And so JFresh here, they did the 2025 forward ranking for the fan vote, and the Wild are very well represented. Turn your definition up to HD, because you're going to need to if you want to see all this. But look, I'll point right to where you need to look for the Minnesota Wild. And hey, you don't have to look outside the top 10 for our first guy, Kirill Kaprizov at number 9. Remember, this is a fan vote. 685,000 votes were cast. It's a head-to-head thing. I voted in it as well, of course, trying to get our Wild guys higher up. But Kirill Kaprizov, going against everyone else, came 9th in the NHL, behind only McDavid, McKinnon, Draisaitl, Kucherov, Barkov, Matthews, Crosby, Pastrnak. And I actually think he could be ahead of David Pastrnak. Honestly, I would have him ahead of him. I absolutely would. You could argue he could be ahead of a couple guys, but 9th is great. We also have Matt Boldy coming in at number 44, which is pretty good. And even Joel Eriksson Ek coming in at number 62. And this is just the top 75 here, and I really like that. We see former Wild Kevin Fiala down there at 66. It feels good to have Joel Eriksson Ek being nicely represented by the fans, because like Eriksson Ek's one of those guys that, especially after this season, I thought he would have been maybe even a little lower. It was a bit of a rough season for Eriksson Ek, but I love to see this here. But it doesn't end here. I got to get to an Athletic article that had, they had a bunch of voting within their writers, and a couple people, I think maybe just one person, but one person at least, had the Minnesota Wild as the Stanley Cup champion runner-ups. And they actually were the second most voted for team for a Dark Horse Cup contender, with only the Winnipeg Jets being ahead of them. And I'll be honest, I don't really know how the Jets are a dark horse, considering they're constantly at the top of the conference, top of the division. They're a very good team. Their goalie just implodes when it comes to the playoffs. I don't know what's going on with Connor Hellebuck, but it doesn't really matter. I wouldn't consider the Jets as much of a dark horse as the Minnesota Wild, especially with some of the stuff going on around the team now. So really, really cool to see the respect coming out from the fans voting our guys. Again, I'd have Boldy maybe a bit higher. You could argue Eriksson Ek a bit higher, Kaprizov in the top 10, and the Athletic writers giving us some love. Sometimes it doesn't feel like we get that much. I mean, Minnesota Wild, the jokes write themselves, I guess, for our team over the past. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that, but I just do love to see that there's a lot of people still giving us love. And, we'll take it where we can get it, because in times like this, where these contract negotiations, the offseason has just not gone to plan, really. it's nice to see some praise, and, it's time to get into this Rossi stuff. So, look, I know we're tired of the Rossi stuff, but like I said, it shouldn't be this complicated. I want to get into a couple of the recent reports that have come out. The first one from Joe Smith, and look, I mean, this is from The Athletic. If he doesn't sign an offer sheet to force the Wild's hand, I think it could be a long one. Right up until training camp or even beyond, the schism just remains wide, and the two sides haven't been actively negotiating. And I'm just like, give me a break, boys. Give me... look, I don't care if it takes that long. I know this is basically like, if he doesn't sign an offer sheet. If I'm Marco Rossi at this point, I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below. I'm leaning back in the chair because I can't. It drives me nuts. But if I'm Marco Rossi, I'm seriously thinking about signing an offer sheet at some point just to force Minnesota's hand. I'm sure he's talking with Billy G about listen, if I sign it, will you match it? Blah blah blah. We know what the Wild are comfortable paying him. Is the offer sheet for a first and a third going to be enough compensation for him? This is a conversation we've had a million times, but the fact now this could very well drag on to the end of training camp just before the season is crazy. They're not even actively negotiating, man. And then you see stuff from Elliot Friedman on his season end 32 thoughts. They didn't seem close on a contract. His representation doesn't want to go short term. Right now they're a little bit stuck. I don't think a trade was ever close. We heard the offers from the Minnesota Wild. The offers were shorter term. I think all the offers that we've heard from the Minnesota Wild were shorter term and low AAV. Even the bridge deal, I think we heard, or I think the bridge deal was low AAV as well. It was nothing, right? And we heard that 5x5 thing. Look, I understand Rossi wants 7. I'm not going to dive into the contract specifics, but not actively negotiating is the big thing to me that is making me a little bit worried. Not worried, I shouldn't say, but I just start to think that the odds of an offer sheet are creeping up every single moment, and I just don't love it because I'm starting to get into a position where I genuinely feel like we're just going to let him go in the offer sheet. But again, that's speculation. I got to go into the final thing, though, from Dave Pagnotta. Because this just came out yesterday. There's so much of a gap in the contractual philosophy here between the two sides. They still like what he brings to the table. Guerin's going to continue to look and see what they can come up with. We've heard the trade market's basically dry for Rossi. The trade didn't really materialize, right? Like Elliot Friedman said, right now they're a little bit stuck. I don't think a trade was ever close. So it's okay, here's what we got. A trade was never close, okay? So basically, Billy G was asking for the world for Marco Rossi. So to me, that tells me that Billy G and the front office value Marco Rossi in terms of a trade very highly. They'd like to get some very good pieces back. We know they would like to get a center. We still hear they're shopping for a center. We know all this stuff. And then you go and trade for Vladimir Tarasenko, whatever. But we know what they value him in a trade as. Because if a trade was never even close, then either teams are just not paying anything for Rossi, or Bill Guerin's asking for too much. It's probably a bit of both. But if that's the case, we heard the leaked offer from Vancouver and stuff. It's are no teams even really willing to offer a first and a third just to get Rossi? Right? That's what I'm wondering now, because the offer sheet possibility is looming. Now, again, Rossi would have to sign it, which is something that, you can't just say, I offer sheet you officially. I declare an offer sheet. No, I mean, Rossi needs to sign it himself. It needs to be somewhere that he wants to go and play, right? It's a place that he would be happy signing with. But is a team that he might want to go to not just willing to offer a first, second, and a third for Rossi to say hey, just take our picks and just go, because otherwise we'll offer sheet him. The fact that that hasn't materialized is confusing as well. And then at the same time, the fact we're not even negotiating, I don't know. Like I said at the start, it shouldn't be this complicated, right? And it's easy for me to say, and I don't see anything, going on behind the scenes. I don't know how Rossi feels. I don't know how Bill Guerin feels. We can only assume what they're feeling based on the stuff that we're hearing. And right now, it's not looking good. And I don't know. I'm not going to go into speculate, Rossi brings this to the table, because we've talked about that a billion times. I need to hear your thoughts. Do these updates change your mind at all? Are you just tired of this situation? Because I'm tired of this situation, but every single update, even still, just eats at me. And now knowing that, this could very well drag on to the start of the season, I don't know if I'm ready for that mentally, because I want to know what the lines are going to be. I want to know that this team is working together. I'm seeing videos of other teams, all of these guys going on trips, hanging out together. And, the fact Marco Rossi here is just he's not really signed yet. Anyway, I'm not saying it's a big red flag or anything, but look, hey, The Athletic thinks we're going to do good. Fans are voting our players pretty highly. I think there's a lot of good stuff coming, so let me know your thoughts down below, because that'll do it for this episode of Wild Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. That's the most important thing. Thank you for tuning in all the time, all off season long. We're here with all your latest updates. I'm your host, Josh Gosse. I'll catch you in the next one, hopefully soon.